Banking business is quite different from the traditional manufacturing business. Traditional manufacturing business যেমন raw material থাকে, bank raw material হচ্ছে the money that savers keep with the bank. So the challenge for the bank is to keep the deposit rate low and the net interest margin high. So question হচ্ছে, what is a net interest margin and how it differs from interest rate spread? Many people think that interest rate spread and the net interest margin are the same thing, but it's quite different, and there's a very subtle difference between the two. Net interest margin and spread are two key parameters that give an indication for a bank's operational efficiency. So how can we calculate the net interest margin? Net interest margin, or NIM, is arrived at by dividing the net interest income by the average interest bearing assets. So remember, the numerator is the net interest income and the denominator is the average interest bearing assets. On the other hand, spread is something different. Spread is the difference between the yield on assets and the cost of liabilities. So NIM can be higher or lower than the interest rate spread. When a bank cuts its interest rate, so its interest income declines. And if it is not being able to reduce the deposit rate by an identical margin, in that case, the bank's net interest margin gets affected. When interest rate in an economy increases, so the bank immediately raises their loans interest rate, but they do not raise their deposit rates immediately. So in that case, banks get benefit because they have higher interest rate spread. On the other hand, whenever there is a decline in interest rate in the economy, so the bank immediately cut their deposit rate, but they do not cut their loans interest rate. So question হচ্ছে, why banks do this? এর একটা কারণ হচ্ছে যে যখন ইকোনমিতে ইন্টারেস্ট রেট বেড়ে যায় অথবা কমে যায়, the impact of that changes in the interest rate felt immediately as the bank has to reprice the total loan book. But that's not the case with deposits. So যখন ইন্টারেস্ট রেট কমে যায় অথবা বেড়ে যায়, এই রেট ইমিডিয়েটলি অ্যাপ্লিকেবল হয় না ফর দ্য ডিপোজিটস, বিকজ that being applicable for the deposits when the existing deposits get mature or new deposits flow in. এখন এই যে হাই নেট ইন্টারেস্ট মার্জিন that is identical to the gross profit margin of a company, so having a high net interest margin is important, but that alone cannot make the bank profitable, because the bank have to deduct the operating expenses and the credit cost from the net interest income, and also they have to deduct for provisions for bad assets and write-off of bad loans. So